Hello and welcome to A Scot on Scotch, the YouTube channel that's dedicated to discussing all things Scotch whisky. My name's Neil. I am a writer, a blogger, a commentator, and most importantly, a whisky lover. I have been floating around the whisky industry for about 10 or 11 years now, in a sort of semi-professional way. I started writing a blog in 2015, and then in 2020 I began working with the Islay Whisky Academy as a host, helping to look after the students that come to Islay from all over the world. And then in 2024 I started my own business, Scottish Rogue, who run whisky experiences here in the city of Glasgow. So this is the first time in quite a while I've sat down to actually put something on YouTube. And to be honest, Scottish Rogue is kind of the reason for that. So we started the business in late 2024. So last year was the kind of first full year of the business being in operation. And we were very busy, quite frankly, as you would expect, setting up a new business. So I didn't really have an awful lot of time to be putting content on YouTube, unfortunately. I am hoping that I'll get a little bit more time. I'm getting a wee bit better at kind of structuring my time. So I'm hoping to get more time to start getting back onto YouTube and keeping you up to date with what we're doing. But yeah, so we'll see how it goes. Well, I'm not going to make any commitments to be doing anything sort of super regular. It's kind of the same with my blog at the minute. So on ascotonscotch.com, I'm aiming to publish a review on there once a week, a new whisky review. I used to do 2 or 3 a week. There's no way I can keep up with that kind of schedule now. So I'm still hoping to do kind of 1 a week. And at the minute, that seems to be working out all right. So we'll just keep that going as long as we can. It may be that as we move into the summer months and tourists expand, that doesn't sound right, does it? As tourists' numbers grow, I may have less and less time to do things like this. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully we'll be able to keep it going throughout most of the year. Wouldn't you know, of course, that when I finally decide to sit down and make some content, I get the cold, so apologies if I sound a little bit bunged up and a wee bit croaky. I'm doing my best here. But yeah, so lots been happening. Obviously, January is a little bit quieter for us in terms of tours and things, so we're not doing as many kind of walking tours, distillery tours. But there's a lot of other things going on because in Glasgow we have the Celtic Connections Festival, which is a music festival, a traditional Scottish music festival, or at least traditional music from all over the world, mostly Scottish, but also with connections to other countries and places. And of course, yesterday, as I record this, was Burns Night. So there have been a few drams, shall we say, over the last few days. Maybe that's why I've got a bit of a cold. So Thursday night last week, Scottish Rogue were part of a Burns Night celebration at the Retail Trust down in Newton Mearns, just south of Glasgow. So the Retail Trust are a really cool organisation. They basically run like retirement estates, retirement villages for people who used to work in the retail industry. They are like a charity. They're supported by the industry itself. And they decided to run a Burns night to show off the sort of newly refurbished hall in one of their retirement estates, and also to reconnect with local businesses and things. So we were delighted to go along. It's a good cause to support that. We went along and brought the sort of whisky element to the evening. So it was the full sort of shebang. We had toasting the haggis, and then we ran a little whisky tasting bar afterwards. So in order to toast the haggis, we had the Robert Burns blend from Isle of Arran Distillers. Now, I'm sure many of you may question that. Some of you might look down your nose at the use of a blended Scotch. But I think for this kind of event, it just worked beautifully because the dram in question is a really soft, gentle, kind of sweet dram. And when you've got a room of, I think there was 60 or 70 people, when you've got a room of that many people, and only a very small percentage are what we would consider whiskey drinkers, you know. Um, but in this kind of event, people maybe want to take the whiskey because they feel it's traditional, they feel they should get involved, get in the spirit of things. So you don't want to go in there with a great big hitter, you know, like a big dominant sherry cask or something cask strength or smoky, or what you want is a crowd pleaser, an easygoing crowd pleaser. And the Robert Burns blend hit the spot beautifully. Everybody that tried it loved it. So it got there, it just did exactly what we needed it to do. Afterwards, of course, we had sort of some single malts available. We stepped things up a little bit. We were supported by the Clydeside, so we had their Stobcross, and we had Napier, so bourbon cask, sherry cask, Clydeside, there for people to try. That was very popular. We also had some ginger ale there, so we were making up some cocktails, just really simple whiskey, ginger ale, lime. So that was doing it for the people who maybe don't really want to drink neat spirits. Now, some of you again might be thinking this is sacrilegious, you know, putting single malt in a cocktail. How could you? Well, the simple fact is, the whiskey industry needs to reach new people at the minute. Things are a wee bit testy out there just now. We are seeing some problems start to come home to roost now, and we need to reach new customers wherever we possibly can. So if we tell people that you can only drink whiskey neat, or that you must never use it in a cocktail or whatever, then all we are doing is blocking off a new audience. And that's not what Scottish Rogue is all about. It's not what I'm all about. We're all about getting whiskey out to new people as much as possible. And in fact, we had one gentleman there who said that he had never been able to enjoy whiskey before, but now could because he drank it with ginger ale and thought it was a beautiful drink. So he even said he had some whiskies at home that people had given him over the years, and he'd never been able to enjoy them before. But he tried our whiskey and ginger ale, he loved it. He's now going to crack open those bottles he has at home. Now, some of you may frown at that, some of you might worry about those single malts going into ginger ale, but the simple fact of the matter is there's now more people drinking whiskey as a result of that cocktail, and that's got to be a good thing, right? As I say, we need new customers, we need new sales, so let's not judge people for how they want to drink their whiskey, right? So that was last week. We also have our brilliant Dram Jam event coming up at the end of this week as I record. So on the 30th of January, we will be back in the Old Toll Bar here in Glasgow on the south side of the River Clyde. And we're doing a sort of Burns theme for that one as well. It's an alternative Burns night, however. So the thinking behind that is, I often wonder at what point the Burns night sort of settled into its current format, right? So, as far as my limited knowledge goes, the very first Burns night took place 5 years after the death of Robert Burns. It was a group of his friends who got together, they went to a pub, they ate some haggis, they had some drams, and they read out some of his poetry, and they had a good night celebrating the memory of their friend. All sounds very convivial and a nice way to celebrate the man's life. But at some point over the year, the Burns Night ceremony, and it is a ceremony, has become this sort of black tie, very prim and proper occasion, you know. And it's almost, you know, I don't want to bring class into it, but it's for posh people now almost, you know. The average person on the street has no interest in a Burns night, and would never be invited to one, and would likely never go to one. And that feels a shame, because it feels like celebrating Burns should be for everyone, you know, and making things like poetry and the arts accessible to all people is really important. Arts and poetry and theatre and whatever it might be, classical music, whatever it might be, should not only be accessible to the wealthy and to the well-to-do. So, we are having a Burns night that we think Rabbie himself would have enjoyed, because this is the thing, Burns has never struck me as a very black tie kind of guy, you know. He's not really the sort of guy that would have fitted in with that sort of crowd, I don't think. Indeed, as far as I understand it, he struggled to settle in Edinburgh when he was surrounded by the sort of the high hegians of the literary society, you know. He was more at home in the pub in Dumfries, for example, where he ended his life, really. So yeah, I like to think that the night that we are going to put on is much more in line with the sort of celebration that Burns himself would have enjoyed. You can come along, enjoy some beautiful traditional Scottish music, drink some drams, have a lovely chat with a nice group of people, and basically just enjoy yourself. I'm sure we'll read out some Burns along the way as well, so we won't forget to celebrate the work of the man. But yeah, no ceremonial nonsense, no prim and proper stuff. Just a relaxed evening in the pub to remember Scotland's national poet. I think he would have appreciated that. So yeah, that's what we've got going on. We on Saturday there as well. We were at SWG3, not in a professional capacity, just as whisky lovers. We were there to check out the National Whisky Festival. This is an event I've been to a few times now. Um, it's not one that I necessarily hit every single year, but I missed it last year and decided that we would go along this time to see what it was like now. SWG3 is a great venue. I really like the place. It's very cool. It's used for lots of different things. So the Yardworks Street Art Festival takes place there in the summer. Lots of nightclubs run in there. There's big name DJs playing there on a regular basis. And it also works very well for the Whisky Festival format. The only slight criticism is the queuing system is a disaster, and it's been like that for years now. And I think that holds the festival back a little bit because the price has gone up now. I think, full transparency, we had guest list and we skipped the queue, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to speak out for the people who did have to wait in the queue, because many of those people paid, I think it was around, when by the time you added on booking fees and everything, £51 for a ticket for this festival. The festival lasted 3.5 hours, 12 o'clock till 3:30. Well, there was a later session as well, but the one I was at, 12 o'clock to 3:30. Now, most people were about 45 minutes, 50 minutes in the queue to get in the door. So you've basically lost the first hour of your festival. And then, of course, they call last orders at 3:15, so you can't get a dram after 3:15. So you're paying £51 based on getting 3.5 hours in the festival, when in actual fact you're lucky if you're getting 2.5 hours in the festival. And I think that's getting pretty poor now. I understand the need for venues to check bags and things like that. You know, it's part of the deal. But there has to be a way to do it quicker than that. See if you have to open the doors early and get people in early, even if you don't pour the drams yet, but get them in the door so that they're able to make the time back, you know? People are paying a lot of money. £51 is a lot of money for a ticket for a whisky festival. And if you're only getting a couple hours out of it, is it worth it? Is that really worth it? So I hope they get that sorted out. It's a great venue. It's a nice festival. There were lots of good exhibitors there. We had some great conversations with people. We tried some wonderful drams, although as always, these festivals now, it becomes more about the people and the conversations you have rather than the whiskies you're trying. But we did have some good drams along the way, a couple that stick out. There was a single malts of Scotland, Kate Watt at the Elixir stall, had a single malts of Scotland, Linkwood, which I remember being very good. Likewise, Cadenheads had a Benriach, which was in an Amontillado sherry cask. And if I remember right, it was only £60 a bottle, which is excellent value for money. So I'm going to be looking at trying to get a bottle of that, I think. Ardbeg also were there and did some cool stuff where they dry ice coming out over the floor and things, which is quite fun, you know. you don't want to take these things too seriously, so I always quite like the way Ardbeg do their marketing. It's just a bit of fun. But they had a as yet unreleased mystery dram, which they basically admitted was a 10-year-old cask strength, which is coming soon. So that was lovely as well. So yeah, lovely event. Really pleased to have made it along. I just, for the sake of the other people in attendance, I wish they'd sort the queue out. Not everybody's privileged to get a queue jump and a guest list. We were very fortunate to have that. But you feel so bad walking past everybody that's been queuing there for ages. They need to sort something about that out, or people just won't go. £50 for 2 hours just isn't. It's not worth it. So yeah, that was this weekend. With the Islay Whisky Academy, of course, I'm still involved there, still helping Rachel out, and we are in the middle just now of putting the itinerary together for the March diploma. So that is getting closer and closer. And we've got some exciting things planned. It will, as always, be a brilliant, magical week of whisky experiences, whisky education, cultural experiences, history, just music. It will be magic as always. And of course, we will be visiting some of the brilliant distilleries there in Islay. We'll be tasting lots of fantastic whiskies. I cannot wait to get started. We are in the process of putting together some guest lecturers and things, which, if all goes to plan, should be really cool programme. So yeah, looking forward to that as well. So, in terms of content on this channel, I wanted to try and avoid doing a sort of whisky reviews thing, because I've been writing whisky reviews for 10 years now, and I still enjoy the written format. I still enjoy doing that, writing out tasting notes and everything. So I'm quite happy to keep doing that, but I didn't really want to do the whole reviews thing here, because there's a lot of people already doing reviews on YouTube, and I felt that there wasn't really any need to add more to that pile. There's people doing it very well, and we don't necessarily need me to be joining in. I don't mind recommending a dram every now and again if something sort of crosses my path that I think's particularly worth it. But what I really like to do is basically just have a look around at the current state of the whisky industry and just have a wee chat about it, right? Sometimes I will descend into a bit of a rant. I try not to, but it does happen. It's just because there's so many things that I get frustrated about. And on that note, there was news last week that Diageo are apparently planning or thinking about closing the Visitor Centre at Clynelish Distillery. Now, that I find that particularly frustrating, because they only opened the Visitor Centre 4 years ago now. 4 years ago. And it was part of a big, wider project where Diageo invested £150 million into Scotch whisky tourism. So they opened the Johnnie Walker visitor experience in Edinburgh, and then they converted 4 distilleries into the Johnnie Walker Four Corners. So we had Clynelish, we had Cardew, we had Glenkinchie, and we had Coolila over there in Islay. And they became the Four Corners of Johnnie Walker, because some of their spirit is used in the Johnnie Walker blends, okay? Now, on the positive side, Coolila, for example, that's the one I know best out of all of them. Coolila needed some investment. It did not live up to the standard of other distilleries on Islay. It needed a new visitor centre. It needed a bit of investment in the infrastructure. What they have done is fantastic. The car park up on the hillside and the walkway across to the top of the building, rather than having to manoeuvre your way down the hairpin bend at the coast. That's all great, and it's great that they invested that in Coolila. I was never really a fan of them putting the Johnnie Walker name above Coolila, because that distillery has its own history, its own story to tell, and it should never have been below the name of Johnnie Walker. Apart from anything else, I'm not sure anybody went to Islay to learn about Johnny Walker. I don't think that's what anybody wanted to do, you know. We want to know about Clynelish and what makes that single malt unique, not what just makes it blend fodder for Johnny Walker, you know. But anyway, as I say, the investment was really good, and the visitor centre is quite a nice big space. The walkway across is excellent. You get fantastic views of the distillery and across the Sound. The tasting bar with the sort of balcony view over the Sound of Islay across to Jura, beautiful. So they've done well there. I haven't been to Clynelish. I haven't seen the visitor centre up there. I imagine it would be of a similar standard. I have heard people in the wake of this news saying that they had a lovely experience when they visited there. But obviously, it hasn't done the numbers that Diageo were expecting it to. And this, it just seems so short-sighted, you know, because when somebody like Diageo puts up £150 million on Scotch whisky tourism, you sort of presume that they've done their research, they've done their work, and figured out the risks and what could possibly go wrong, and, you know, what they would need for that to be a success and to keep running. Now, a lot of people might tell you that the state the whisky industry's in, we couldn't have seen coming. But the simple fact of the matter is, many people did see it coming. People have been predicting this for a long time. And yeah, you know, things like the current president of the USA putting tariffs back in place and all that. I don't think any of that was a huge surprise. It was always a possibility. So this sort of attitude of, oh, we've been caught on the hoof. No, you haven't. Everyone should have known this was a possibility. Many, many people who have been in the whisky industry for a long, long time were warning that this was a possibility. I remember having a conversation in Islay 2-3 years ago with John McDougall, who's worked in the industry since the 60s. He was the distillery manager at Lafroig in the 1960s, for example. He's seen Whisky Loch 1, and I remember him saying that he was very, very concerned that we were on our way to Whisky Loch number 2. And guess what's happened, you know? So you wonder, how did the people at the top, the people making the decisions at Diageo, how did they not heed those warnings? How did they plough ahead, building all this stuff, only to shut it down 4 years later? Now, yes, it's only Clynelish at this time. We don't know what's happening with Clynelish or Cardew, any of them. There's no indication that they're under threat. And Clynelish, to be fair, is in a fairly sort of very northern spot. But I guess they assumed it would do a bit of trade from the North Coast 500 route. But I'm not sure the North Coast 500 route necessarily crosses over with whisky tourism. Maybe they're not the same people that are doing those things. So Clynelish is still a little bit out the way. So yeah, it will be a real shame to see the visitor centre closing down so soon after it opened. And more to the point, it seems that it will mean job losses, and that's not what we ever want to see, right? We don't ever want to see people in the whisky industry being laid off. Especially, I think, visitor centre staff, you know, your tour guides or brand home guides or ambassadors or whatever they call them now. See, to be honest, they're kind of the unsung hero of the whisky industry, you know. Tour guides, brand ambassadors, those people, those are the ones that are out doing the legwork to make people familiar with the brand, with what it stands for, with where the flavour comes from, all of that stuff. They are some of the most important people in the industry. And yet, they're the first ones to go when things turn bad. I mean, you think of brand ambassadors who have been the ones out there working to establish an audience for these brands over the last, 20 years. So as things were booming, they were out there slogging away, working to get the brand in front of as many people as possible in a highly competitive market. But then as soon as things go bad, they're the first ones to leave. It seems disloyal to me, you know? It seems a real shame that the people who show visitors round the distillery and treat them well and make sure they have a great time and leave with a good impression of your brand. I think it's a real shame that they're the first people to be let go. Now, I'm not saying I want to see anybody be let go, but you know, it's a shame. I think if anything can be done to keep that visitor centre open, then do so and keep these people in work if you possibly can. Because, of course, let's not pretend that the people at the top are feeling the hit, you know, the shareholders at Diageo or whatever. The idea is to let the visitor centre staff go so that they can keep the profits rolling into their pockets, you know, during hard times. They don't want to take a hit in their profits. They want to keep that money coming in. It's interesting to see that the whisky industry seems to be advertising again in a way that it hasn't for a while. You know, you think over the last year or so, we've had Glenmorangie doing the advertising campaign with Harrison Ford. Lafroig have done the campaign with Willem Dafoe, a sort of weird, surreal campaign there. And perhaps strangest of all, Diageo or Johnny Walker partnered up with Sabrina Carpenter. Now, the Harrison Ford campaign was quite a nice wee campaign. It looked good, it was humorous. I just wonder, it feels a bit like the industry has fallen back on everything it knew back in the 70s and 80s. You know, celebrity endorsement. Have we not moved on at all? You know, is there not a better way we can advertise this product? It feels very strange. It's still this sort of selling. You don't sell the brand, you sell the lifestyle kind of bullshit, you know. And I'm not sure who that really appeals to. Who thinks they can be like Harrison Ford because they drink Glenmorangie, you know. As for the Sabrina Carpenter thing, now, nobody, I would never question her brand because she's a global superstar, and I have a daughter at home who's borderline obsessed with her. But the images that they chose for that campaign felt like stepping back to the 1970s or something. She's draped across a piano with a glass of Johnny Walker beside her. And listen, I am not the target audience for Sabrina Carpenter, I'm sure. And maybe the idea is to appeal to the sort of younger generation that likes Sabrina Carpenter. You know, these young 20-year-olds or whatever. And maybe show them that whiskey could be for them as well. I'm sure that was the intention. And if it's done that, great, right? If it has any success in that, brilliant. It's just that it doesn't actually look any different from the sort of advertising campaigns that came out years back, whose goal was to appeal to the sad old men, basically, who were the traditional whiskey audience anyway. So, whatever the intention behind it was, you've got to look at the way it presented itself, and in my opinion, it didn't do that very well. I don't think the idea of pairing with Sabrina Carpenter is in itself a bad idea. It's just that going for the very, let's say, classic look that they went with in those adverts, I don't think it puts the right message across. It looks like you're still stuck in the old ways of doing things, you know. As I said, I acknowledge I am not the target audience for that campaign, so maybe I'm picking it up wrong. If it gets more women interested, brilliant. But I always think, you know, Johnny Walker have made big mistakes in terms of trying to appeal to women before. We remember the Jane Walker nonsense, where we had to have a pink bottle to appeal to women. Now, again, I'm no expert in what appeals to women, not by a long chalk. But to me, you get women interested in whiskey the exact same way you get men interested in whiskey. You tell them about it, you let them try some, and you treat them like a human being. Surely that's it, right? We've been really lucky with Scottish Rogue that 50%, just about there or thereabouts, of our walking tour attendees have been women, right? So it's pretty much 50-50. At one point, it was 52% women. I think it's kind of a bit more level now. But we're really pleased with that. I don't know what it is we're doing that's achieving that, or if it's just a sign that more and more women are interested now in coming to learn about whisky, to try whisky, and to hear about its connections with Scotland as a place. I think that's really interesting, and hope to see more of it, quite frankly. Again, as we said before, we need new people drinking whisky. So if this is a man's drink, we've cut off 50% of the population, right? So yeah, that let's hope we see more of that, and hopefully these advertising campaigns are good. They just feel are good for the industry rather. It just feels like a step back in time a bit to me. We should be looking forward, not back. So I'll tell you what, maybe for a wee bit of positivity just before we kind of wrap up here, right? As I mentioned earlier, there are some good new distilleries and stuff out there that I am hopeful for, okay? I'm hopeful that the quality of product that they're going to put out is going to be worth it. It's going to be bringing something new to the table. It's going to be creating new brands, new flavours that we can get on board with, right? So it's not all doom and gloom. There's still new, exciting things to come in Scotch whisky, right? And just as a wee example of that, I just recently got to taste this. This is a sample of new make spirit from Benbecula Distillery in the Outer Hebrides. Benbecula is just between North and South Uist there. So Macmillan Spirits Co., who have started the distillery, they have some independent bottle of stuff out there, Wheelhouse Whisky, Maluka Rum and Makar Gin, I think it is. But they also do the Benbecula Distillery, right? So no whisky yet. It only began production, I believe, mid-2024, so we're going to be a little while yet. But what I can tell you is I really enjoyed the new make spirit. Now, this stuff is bottled at 70%. I didn't need to add a lot of water to it. It was only a couple of drops, really, and it became quite a pleasant little sipper. Now, to be fair, you can't always tell a lot from a new make spirit, right? Because that's not the whisky. The whisky is going to be radically different from that. But what I would say is there's enough there to suggest that this is going to be an interesting malt when it comes along. In particular, there's a lovely creamy sort of oiliness to the spirit. It's got really nice weight to it. Now, certainly that's at 70%. Maybe when it's cut, it'll lose that a little bit. But it feels like it's got a bit of muscle behind it, a bit of weight behind it. Lovely fruitiness, overripe fruits, particularly on the nose. Real sweetness of sort of honey and toffee at the front. And then tiny little whisper of smoke at the back as well. Really, really positive experience tasting that. So fingers crossed, right? Fingers crossed it's going to become something special once it matures into whisky. We'll see how that goes. All right? Thank you very much for watching. I will try and keep this going as much as I possibly can. Please subscribe, hit the wee bell thing so you get notifications whenever I post. You could also try hopping over to scotonscotch.com and subscribing to the mailing list there. You will then get all my reviews, written reviews, straight to your mailbox. Yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Neil. I have been a Scot on Scotch. See you again soon. Slanjava.